Discover the incredible moment a millionaire dad transformed a little girl's life revealed. Jake Thompson stood at the edge of his sprawling backyard, clutching a crystal glass of scotch. A thick fog settled over his thoughts, soothed only by the opulence around him: a perfect lawn, a designer home. Yet, it all felt hollow. His father had passed recently, leaving behind memories punctuated by disappointment. Jake struggled with the regret of years spent avoiding their strained relationship, now magnified by the absence of reconciliation. He accumulated wealth, but what was success worth if it rang so empty within? The laughter of his children echoed from the house, distant reminders of a connection so easily fractured. Was this the life he wanted? The questions gnawed at him, a cacophony that wouldn't subside. Tonight, he was to attend a charity gala, an obligation more than a desire, but even that felt like another layer of the facade he had to uphold. As a successful tech entrepreneur, being seen mattered more so than feeling. Yet the glittering crowd would never know the anguish that shadows him. Jake felt like a fraud dressed in privilege, uncomfortable amidst laughter that felt like acid on his tongue. He shifted in his seat, grappling with the clashing emotions of disdain for the superficiality around him. His breath hitched as he focused on the art displays lining the room, abstract colors colliding, curve and line kissing on canvas. A young girl's work caught his eye, bright and vibrant and naive. It was the only thing in the room with genuine emotion. Approaching the exhibit, he marveled at the joy captured in the strokes. Was this the essence of freedom? An unfiltered glimpse into a world untouched by the burdens of wealth and expectation. In that moment, he felt hope, a spark ignited by the tension in his gut, but would that hope return to haunt him? What did he know of this girl? This Lily? Would it be condescension masked as charity? The ground between empathy and ridicule felt frail and terrifying. His affluent friends surrounded him, their voices penetrating his thoughts, sneering at the idea of appropriate philanthropy. The whispers clawed at him. What would it mean to reach down from his pedestal and extend a hand? Was he masking a yearning for absolution? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With Lily's peace imprinted in his mind, he wrestled with shuddered fears. What if the moment he reached out was seen as opportunistic? Would it stir the disdain of his social circle? That tension mounted, as he envisioned introducing this girl to a world that could give her wings, yet doubted his own integrity. Each step he contemplated felt monumental, like crossing over a chasm where the truth of his privilege would be laid bare. Time slipped past him, and as the evening wound down, Jake stood still within the gallery, contemplating the fragility of the girl's dreams and his own sense of belonging. Desperation clawed at his throat. What could he authentically offer? Was it a donation or would it be more? Would stepping into her world give him clarity or just expose him more? Staring at the artwork that pulled him into a realm of possibility, he felt the weight of his own life crash around him. The future felt like a tightrope. Just as uncertainty reached its peak, a new thought, sharp and unexpected, ignited inside him, threatening to spill everything he thought he knew. Jake stood paralyzed before the vibrant painting, his heart racing as the reality of his internal struggle settled heavily on his chest. He could almost hear the color-splashed canvas whispering his name, urging him to act. It was a moment that demanded honesty, not just with the girl behind the art, but with himself. Who was he at his core? In that pulsing moment of doubt and desire, Jake contemplated the path before him. Could he break free from the chains of expectation that tethered him to a life crafted of appearances? Who would he become if he chose to step down from the pedestal society had placed him on? The juxtaposition tore at him, success on paper, yet a lingering emptiness that threatened to consume him. Lily's artwork pulsed with the pulse of possibility, a stark contrast to the sterile conversations cascading around him. Every laugh felt like a reminder of the human connection he now craved, and for the first time, he recognized a deeply rooted fear, the fear of vulnerability. Just how many times had he shielded himself from genuine interactions in favor of hollow transactions? It wasn't just the idea of reaching down that troubled him, it was the anxiety over the authenticity of his motives. As the gala's lights dimmed slightly to signal the beginning of fundraising speeches, his heart sank at the thought of presenting a check and being absorbed back into the suffocating comfort of his affluent life. He imagined his children standing there, witnessing their father's ambivalence towards real impact versus superficial charity. Would they truly understand? Would they see a man consumed by the pressure to appear charitable while he grappled with a growing resentment for their perfect surroundings? The evening wore on, and with every passing minute, each laugh from familiar faces felt more alien. It was as if the walls around him were closing in, pressing against his need to act, while the voice in his head echoed louder, "Wouldn't it be better to keep things as they were?" The struggle intensified, revealing the inherent conflict between his well-constructed identity and the possibility of a fulfilling life rooted in authenticity. He glanced at the girl's painting one last time, desperation clawing at his throat. The image of Lily's joy struck him deeply, a joy that was both pure and terrifying in its potential. Could he offer her something real and impactful? The thought of stepping into the role of a mentor, not a benefactor, challenged him to redefine success in his life. What if instead of just donating money, he shared connections, opportunities, and insights? Jake exhaled loudly, steeling himself against the tidal wave of self-doubt. Biting the inside of his cheek, he pushed through the fear, determined to approach Lily, to learn more about her story and dreams. Would he find value in the exchange? Or would it, too, become a transaction fraught with tension and restraint? His resolve solidified. He was tired of being a spectator in his life. As he turned to weave through the crowd, a sudden flash of doubt gripped him. Was this the moment of awakening or an elaborate self-deception? In the midst of self-reflection, he locked eyes with someone across the room, a woman who had witnessed the entire scene unfolding. Her presence carried a strangely familiar weight. It was as if she understood the tumultuous journey he faced, and just then, Jake realized he was not the only one grappling with the reality of who they had become. A sudden urge surged within him to confront this darkness together, reminding him that perhaps he wasn't alone in seeking transformation. With renewed determination, Jake took a step forward, eyes focused on the unknown that awaited him. The evening promised more than art and idle conversations. It beckoned a journey into the depths of empathy and connection, a venture that could redefine both his and Lily's destinies. Then, just as he caught his breath and locked eyes with the woman, a different realization flashed through him. Thunderous and decisive, he had to find out who she was, but also who he could be when they faced each other. Jake moved through the crowd, each step an inner battle against the tightness in his chest. The vibrant colors of the painting remained emblazoned in his mind as he approached the mysterious woman, drawn by an intuitive understanding that their lives intertwined in ways yet unknown. He navigated the laughter and chatter, momentarily tuning out the world as his pulse quickened. "Excuse me," he said, his voice softer than he intended, causing her to glance up. She had striking features, a depth to her eyes that reflected both wisdom and warmth. "Do we know each other?" She tilted her head slightly, a smile breaking across her face. "Not yet, but I think we might be on parallel journeys." Her voice was smooth, almost soothing, tugging at the threads of tension knotted in his mind. Jake hesitated, caught off guard by her candidness. "I feel like I'm at a crossroads. Something's pushing me to connect, to make an impact." His palms felt clammy, a stark contrast to the polished demeanor he usually wore like armor. "I get that," she said, her gaze unwavering. "Sometimes the hardest step is acknowledging that we need more than just success, we need purpose." She gestured toward the painting behind them, the hues blurring a bit in Jake's vision, messaged with his emotional turmoil. "This artwork represents hope and vulnerability. It makes you confront not just what you've done, but what you truly want." Jake swallowed hard. "My life has revolved around appearances, and I'm starting to see how empty that feels. I think of my kids, I want to be a role model for them. But how can I guide them if I can barely find my own way? The woman nodded, drawing closer, lowering her voice. It's brave to admit that. So many wear masks to shield themselves from uncovering their fears and desires. But stepping out from behind those masks is where real transformation happens. Her words wrapped around him like a gentle embrace, yet ignited a fire within, provoking both doubt and aspirations. He felt tangled in his own psyche, knowing the truth of his struggle but frightened by the implications of authentic change. "What about you?" he asked, intrigued. "What's holding you back?" Her expression grew somber, the levity dashed momentarily. "I've always felt torn between pursuing my passion for art and the practical life everyone expects of me. I fear following my dreams means sacrificing stability." As she voiced her own vulnerabilities, Jake felt an unexpected kinship. They were both navigating vast oceans of doubt, searching for meaning in a world dictated by external expectations. He saw that behind her bravery lay similar fears to his. Maybe they could challenge those shadows together. "Would you want to collaborate? I mean, on something that could authentically impact lives?" The proposal slipped from his lips before he fully processed its weight. It surprised him, the urgency in his suggestion reflecting the rising determination to forge a new path. Her eyes sparkled with intrigue and a hint of excitement. "You mean create a platform to support artists like Lily? Give them the exposure and resources they need?" Jake nodded vigorously, the prospect of real change electrifying. "Let us not just be patrons, let us build a community of authentic creators who can inspire others." He could envision it a haven where raw talent and genuine support thrived, freeing both artists and their benefactors from the chains of expectation. The corners of her mouth lifted into a smile, and she extended her hand. "You know, they say you're only as strong as your network. You might just find more strength in vulnerability than you ever imagined." As they shook hands, a rush of energy pulsed through Jake, a vivid spark igniting his previously dormant ambition. He realized that this encounter marked not just a turning point for him, but a shared opportunity for growth. Just then, a sudden commotion erupted on the other side of the gallery, a voice, loud and authoritative, cutting through the ambience. Jake and the woman exchanged confused glances, the moment of connection fractured by the unexpected disruption. He tightened his grip on her hand, sensing the thrilling uncertainty of what lay ahead. The echoes of uncertainty melded with burgeoning determination. Whatever shadowed this moment could shift in an instant. The wave of authenticity they had just begun to explore was suddenly susceptible to external chaos. Their shared gaze lingered, the electricity of their new alliance intensifying. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice a mix of intrigue and anxiety, resonating with vulnerability. "I don't know," she mused, brow furrowed. "But it feels important." The air thickened with the promise of the unknown, fateful decisions and unforeseen revelations looming at the edges. The time had come to face whatever mystery awaited them at the intersection of their lives. The authoritative voice cut through the haze of Jake's thoughts, pulling him back into a present that felt both surreal and charged with tension. He turned to see a gallery security guard, his posture rigid and stern, confronting a group of trespassers who had apparently crossed into the display area that was off-limits. At that moment, Jake's mind raced, a cacophony of thoughts colliding as he confronted not just the scene unfolding before him, but the uncertainty of his own trajectory. That he glanced back at the woman, who still held his gaze with unwavering attention. Her eyes mirrored his own inner turmoil, each pulse of anticipation resonating between them. "This is why I want to build something real," he thought, grappling with the growing awareness that their connection was rooted in something deeper, a shared yearning for authenticity. As the altercation built in intensity, Jake felt an innate urge to intervene. The chaos encroached upon the quiet epiphany they were forming together. What if they're just misunderstood? He mused. It triggered a thought. Maybe it was time to turn the lessons he was learning into action. He found himself questioning whether he was willing to move beyond his past of passive involvement into a role that carried real weight. "Do you think we should get involved?" he asked, not wanting to lose the moment's transformative energy. "Maybe we should speak with them." The woman hesitated, her cautious nature coming to the forefront as she processed his suggestion. "That could escalate things," she replied softly, chewing lightly on her lip. "But perhaps we can't just sit idly by." The intensity of the scene conjured contrasting images in Jake's mind: art, vulnerability, a chance at transformation. Could he truly bridge the connection from the gallery to reality? Surely, the commotion outside mirrored the uncertainty he harbored within, the very fear of inadequacy he believed he was striving to overcome. "You know," he began, the idea forming in his mind. "Perhaps this is a microcosm of what we can achieve beyond this gallery." This moment reflects how people often feel trapped by circumstances or expectations. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, as though she too grasped the weight of that realization. "We could use this experience," she responded, her voice gaining strength, "to establish something transformative, a platform, an advocate for those whose voices feel unheard. But to do it effectively, we need to learn how to work through chaos productively." "That's it!" Jake exclaimed, excitement coursing through him at the prospect. "Instead of stepping back from situations like this, we should be stepping in. We need to show others the power of facing uncertainty." But then doubt crept back in, whispering in his ear, asking if he would falter like so many others. After all, he was just a businessman. Could he really be a catalyst for change? He inwardly pushed against those walls of self-doubt, recognizing that this feeling, a mix of fear and determination, spoke to a deeper understanding of himself, one who had far too often chosen comfort over authenticity. The commotion escalated as the guard issued a stern warning, and the tension crackled in the air. Jake realized this was more than just an incident, it was a test. "Are we going to let this boundary dictate our actions?" he asked, searching her expression for confirmation. "Or will we seize this moment?" Amidst the distraction, something shifted within Jake. The internal battle began to unravel threads of his past, revealing a cascade of unresolved fears and untapped potential. He had an inkling that this confrontation was a metaphor for the pivotal choices he needed to make. As their eyes locked, he saw not just a reflection of his own turmoil, but a flicker of the courageous architect he could become. He took a breath, feeling more grounded than ever. "Let us engage with this moment, together," he said, resolve solidifying in his voice. Before she could respond, he turned to the unfolding situation, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Jake had stepped closer to the edge of uncertainty, ready to push boundaries not just in the gallery but within himself. But as he took that first decisive step, a low growl from the crowd halted him in his tracks. He scanned the crowd, knowing fundamentally that a crossroads awaited beyond this moment, but an unforeseen confrontation loomed ever closer. Was he truly ready to confront the shadows? And, more importantly, was this his chance to redefine not only a moment, but his entire path? The clashing voices grew louder around him, echoing the turmoil within, and he sensed that whatever lay ahead would demand everything he was ready to uncover but still feared to embrace. Jake stood at the precipice of action, the tension in the air a biting reminder of the stakes at hand. The growl from the crowd echoed like a warning siren, urging him to reconsider or to consolidate his resolve. He felt the heat of expectation on his skin as he scanned the faces around him. Each one appeared to represent a unique story, a fractured narrative longing for coherence. Ascertaining this landscape of raw, unfiltered humanity wasn't just a task, it was an invitation to realign his own internal compass. Now or never, he murmured to himself, summoning the conviction that had eluded him for far too long. The fear of being an onlooker had to be eclipsed by the necessity of engagement, both in the gallery and his life beyond. If he was ever going to build that platform for change, it had to begin now. Every failed moment lived in passive acceptance flashed in his mind, urging him forward, daring him to engage with threads of unpredictability. That he took a step into the fray, each movement laced with deliberation, attuned to the turmoil dwindling into palpable silence. His heart thudded, a primal rhythm accompanying the encroaching confrontation. "You're stepping outside your narrative," he thought, both terrified and exhilarated by standing in defiance of his fears. He felt alive, a raw entity absorbing the intensity around him, forced to relinquish the comforts of predictability that had yielded nothing. With every passing second, his resolve crystallized. He was one to dismantle the illusion of authenticity that cloaked so many lives. What if I fail? The voice of self-doubt persisted in a cynical whisper, but it was drowned out by the thrum of urgency pulsing in his veins. He engaged that internal dialogue, reforming it into his own mantra. What if I succeed? I think they just wanted to see the art, not make trouble, Jake said, projecting confidence even as he wrestled with his own uncertainty. He locked eyes with the trespassers. He could see their tension mirroring his own internal struggle. They weren't just rebels at a gallery, they were humans lost in a system that often disregarded their agency. Clarity sparked in him as he considered how simply being heard could transform the narrative. The guard's face soured at his words, disbelief mixed with escalating annoyance. Jake pressed on, eyes unwavering. What if we invited them to share their reasons? In a space meant for exploration, shouldn't we allow for conversations, not consequences? The crowd shifted, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected proposition. Opinions skated the air, others chiming in subtly to support him. For the first time, Jake felt the electric power of collective consciousness unfolding around them. The woman beside him watched, her face a canvas of astonishment and growing admiration. He is forging a path through the chaos. This isn't just about art, this is about humanity, she likely thought, and in that moment, he wanted nothing more than to believe it too. Each breath sucked in the surrounding energy, drawing from their shared uncertainty and resentment. This was his moment to push against the siloed experiences he had once been a part of. Guided by instinct, Jake extended his hand toward the first trespasser, ready to craft a bridge over the chaos. Let us talk, let us create an opportunity for understanding. But as the first steps were taken toward reconciliation, a sudden shout pierced the air, and he felt the ground beneath him shifting yet again. The immediate threat loomed as he turned to decipher the new wave of agitation rippling through the crowd. Was this the climax of his burgeoning potential? Could he pivot not only their path but also illuminate an avenue for his own transformation? Suddenly, a fracture appeared in the narrative he had just begun to reshape, but it would take all he had learned to navigate the uncertainty now threatening to envelop them. The time had come to confront not merely the crowd but his own evolving identity as an agent of change. Would he have the courage to face the coming storm, or would fear revert him to the shadows once again? With the shout still resonating, Jake pivoted to locate the source. An older man with a disheveled appearance was shouting something unintelligible, his voice punctuated with desperation. This wasn't just a protest, it underscored an urgency that transcended mere words, rekindling Jake's pulse racing within him. He turned back to the trespassers, feeling crucial seconds slipping away that could alter both their futures. Listen. He called, voice steady but fierce. Everyone here has a story to tell. This chaos won't produce understanding. Let us redirect this energy into something constructive. The crowd inhaled as one, the moment stretching taut like a guitar string ready to snap. He saw the flicker of recognition in some eyes and acknowledgement that connection could be stronger than contention. His stomach twisted in anticipation as the tension swirled, each heartbeat a countdown. Who cares about their stories? Shouted a younger woman, her arms folded defiantly. They're causing a scene. Why should they have a voice when they disrupt us? Her words landed heavy. It was a challenge, a moment for Jake to reflect on what he truly believed. These impulsive reactions were the noise of fear of change, fear of accountability. He inhaled deeply, holding the air within himself, gathering the courage to confront this very obstacle. Because we all deserve to be heard, he replied, his voice descending to a more personal level. I once stood in the shadows, just like you. I thought my voice didn't matter. But I was wrong. Every life has value. A ripple traveled through the crowd. Some shifted their weight, glancing at one another. Jake could feel he was inching closer to a breakthrough. But with every advancement came the worrisome reminder that a swift backward movement was equally possible. He needed to push further, to probe deeper, with determination swelling again in his chest. He continued, what if we invite them to explain their actions? You may find they have feelings of anger, of neglect, feelings you may share. Isn't art supposed to inspire discussion? The younger woman sneered, you think they deserve sympathy? They're ruining this for everyone. Frustration ignited in Jake. He understood her indignation, her fears were relatable, rooted in a world where they often felt powerless. In a desperate bid to connect, he leaned closer, tone shifting to compassion. Instead of seeing them as an attack on your space, what if we see them as a reflection of our own frustrations? What if there is something we can learn? With each word, he felt the foundations of his own identity reformulating. He was dwindling away the remnants of that passive, complacent Jake, crafting instead a persona that embodied hope and resilience. Was this confrontation his stepping stone toward becoming an agent of change? Yet, beneath the palpable groundswell of emotion, Jake detected a stirring unrest. The older man had begun to raise his voice once more, gesturing toward the entrance where another figure appeared, a uniformed officer this time. The atmosphere shifted again, tension thickening as a potential confrontation loomed. The crowd recoiled slightly, uncertainty ricocheting among them. Jake's instincts alarmed him. He had sparked an ember, but now embers had the power to ignite flames. He caught sight of the woman beside him, her attention fixated on the figure approaching from the entrance. If Jake faltered now, everything might collapse. Now it's not just about the art or the so-called disruption. It's about confronting the reality that we create space for all voices, he declared, raising his voice to capture everyone's focus. Let us reach out instead of turning against each other. If we don't engage, we lose the chance for understanding. And if we lose that chance? The crowd fell silent, the weight of his words settling heavily among them, but as he looked toward the officer, whose expression betrayed no intent for dialogue, Jake's nerve cracked. Could he stand firm in his resolve even as the specter of authority loomed? Would he finally assert that newfound identity as a changemaker, or would the fear of consequence silence him once more? The answer lay just beyond reach, lurking in that space filled with conflict. Would he navigate that perilous path between hope and fear, or would he find himself bowing down to the rising tide of despair again? Jake's resolve wavered as the officer drew nearer, the tension in the air thickening like fog. With the glimmer of authority approaching, the stakes felt suddenly amplified. Faces in the crowd, previously so engaged, now flickered with apprehension, worry etching lines deeper than mere moments. Finding a beacon of strength among swirling insecurities, Jake clenched his fists and forced his gaze back to the crowd. He needed to embody the change he sought, to manifest courage and an unwavering belief in the possibility of understanding. His heart raced against the beat of uncertainty, but a flicker of determination illuminated within him. We can't simply close our ears to those who challenge us, he pressed, tone laced with conviction, but the officer arrived, an imposing figure who surveyed the scene with narrowed eyes. What is going on here? He barked, cutting through the thick tension like a knife. Jake felt the energy shift palpably, the mood darkening as the officer's presence cast a shadow over his fragile attempt at connection. Sir, we're seeking dialogue, Jake responded, trying to keep his voice steady. This isn't meant to be a confrontation. Just a discussion about feelings and perspectives. The officer's brow furrowed, skepticism lighting his expression. Feelings. These people are disrupting the peace. This isn't a place for your experiments in empathy. Jake swallowed hard, hardly digesting the officer's derision. Suddenly, the crowd was looking to him again, their faith hanging in the balance. This wasn't just about the older man's desperate cries, it was about every person present recalibrating their voices, yet he stood teetering at the edge of that revelation. You don't understand, he said, his voice louder now, carrying an edge that surprised even him. This isn't an experiment, it's an opportunity. Disruption comes from unmet needs. If we dismiss them, we perpetuate this cycle of anger. The crowd reacted, their anxieties stirred into a slow but steady hum. Was he really speaking truth, or was he merely grasping at an ethereal hope? Striking the right chords in others felt exhilarating, even as he teetered on the brink of possible backlash. Jake! A voice cried out from within the crowd. It was the younger woman again, arms now uncrossed but still defensive. What if they just cause more problems? They obviously don't respect our space. The officer's gaze shifted between Jake and the crowd, as if sizing up a concealed threat. He remained unmoved, unleashed authority looking to suffocate the burgeoning conversation. "No one is here to cause trouble," Jake said, fury igniting within him. Some might call it misguided, but all he felt was the weight of honor clinging to his words. They need to voice their frustrations, and we need to listen. Otherwise, we risk erasing them altogether. But it was a high-stakes gambit. Could he match the officer's unyielding stance with empathetic defiance? Would he rise as a figure of change or shrink back, risking the reconciliation he had fought so hard to initiate? No retreat. He sensed an awakening in the spaces surrounding him, and the faces of the onlookers transformed into agents of collective hope. Yet the officer stepped closer, voice now colder. "You're treading on thin ice, and if this continues, I will have to take action." Jake reeled from the tension coiling tighter, his confidence trembling. The officer's threats hung heavy in the air, compelling him to confront his deepest fears. Was this the moment he would allow his principles to falter under pressure? A whisper of clarity flickered in his mind. The only way to truly change was not through the absence of fear but through confronting it directly. As he shifted his posture, gathering strength within himself, a resolution ignited in his chest. "Then let us challenge that notion, starting now," he declared, facing the officer's disapproving scowl head-on. A surge of daring coursed through his veins as he realized he wasn't merely advocating for the older man but for himself, refusing to fold in the face of intimidation. The crowd sensed his renewed commitment, their anticipation palpable. The shift was so intense, not just an articulation of noise, but a symphony of voices intersecting in mutual understanding. And in that instant, he glimpsed a passage toward a new self, one that dealt not only with the external realities of authority but also with internal growth and reassurance. That defining moment, however, would demand more than fleeting courage. Could he withstand the inevitable storm brewing around him? Would this defining encounter redefine his path forward, or would he find himself unraveling when faced with the looming confrontation ahead, now brimming with tension? The officer's steely gaze seemed to freeze the air around them. Jake felt the weight of the moment stretching like an elastic band ready to snap. The quiet around them thickened, every eye was trained on him, and in that silence, clarity emerged. Perhaps it was the adrenaline surging through his veins or the desperate need to hold on to this fragile momentum, but Jake realized he needed more than rhetoric. He needed authenticity, a connection deeper than confrontational words. Looking out at the crowd, he took a breath, grounding himself in their presence rather than the officer's looming threat. "What I'm asking for is simple but powerful," he began, voice steady, projecting into the thrumming silence. "It's not just about the discussions we have, it's about the emotions we share. We need to feel and to be heard if we ever want to move forward." Caught between two worlds of authority and unrest, Jake gestured to the crowd. "If anyone here feels silenced, I invite you to join me. Share your truth rather than letting it fester. It's time we confront not just our frustrations but also our shared humanity." He didn't need a chant or a rallying cry, all he needed was the collective heartbeat of the crowd to respond. Jake felt an internal shift, like claustrophobic walls pulling away. This was a test, not just from the officer but from the universe. Was he capable of rising above fear to forge a genuine dialogue? People began to stir, eyes brightening, and he recognized the beginnings of the connection he craved. A few faces nodded, hesitantly at first, then more confidently, as others followed suit. But the officer was relentless, stepping forward with an intensity that tried to drown out Jake's growing courage. "This isn't a forum for feelings, it's a disruption that must end." The officer's voice boomed, but Jake didn't flinch. Instead, he met the challenge with composure. "Then what happens to the voices of those who feel unheard? What happens if we disregard their pain?" Jake's challenge crystallized the moment. As he posed the question, the officer hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden shift in Jake's conviction. Behind the officer, Jake noticed the crowd's tension begin to unravel, their energy transforming into a ripple of solidarity. But could he hold that energy? Was it enough to maintain this fragile atmosphere against authority? His heart pounded like a war drum, each beat echoing the urgency of the situation. Jake! A strong voice rang out from the crowd. It belonged to the older man. You speak to what we feel. I haven't been able to express my anger, but what you're saying resonates. Those words crackled with power, igniting something within Jake. Here was the very embodiment of the frustrations he advocated for. He felt a surge of purpose. In the face of the officer's authority, his fear began to dissolve, revealing a deeper understanding of his mission. I'm not asking for permission to feel or express, Jake stated boldly. I'm asserting the need for those of us who have been pushed to the margins. If we don't allow this discussion to happen, we rob ourselves of the chance to heal. He turned his focus back to the officer, willing to challenge authority further. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just about the crowd or the officer. It was Jake emerging from his shell, embracing parts of himself he'd kept hidden, his ability to lead, evoke emotion, and stir the embers of change. The air thickened with anticipation, but Jake felt steady. Each moment was a brushstroke on the canvas of his evolution. In standing against the officer, he was reshaping his understanding of bravery, but just as hope surged, the officer took a menacing step closer. An imperceptible shift in the crowd suggested the tension was changing again. Enough of this nonsense, the officer warned, voice low and dangerous. You'll regret this defiance. As he responded to the looming threat, Jake's determination crystallized into a new resolve. He understood the stakes had escalated, but so had his sense of purpose. Instinct fluttered within him, surging against the current of fear. Somewhere deep within, a realization bloomed. Would he discover a hidden strength to stand firm against the looming confrontation? The officer's presence bore down like a storm cloud, but Jake felt a volcanic force rising at his core, a reckoning of sorts. What impact would this encounter have on the course of his life? What profound lessons awaited him as he prepared for the inevitable clash ahead? As the officer advanced, Jake felt the heat of the moment intensify. The atmosphere crackled with energy, a blend of fear and hope swirling around him. He understood now that this was not just a confrontation, it was a crucible, a test of his character. This unique moment was about more than mere words in the air, it was a defining point for him as a leader, one that could dictate the course of his life. With every steadying breath, Jake centered himself. The urge to back down and seek safety clawed at him, yet there was something undeniable in his heart. He was standing not just for himself but for those who felt powerless, those trapped in silence. This was his chance to transform fear into action and to embody the change he so desperately wanted to see. Regret? Jake responded, his voice unwavering, piercing through the officer's threats. The only regret here would come from ignoring our pain and pretending everything is fine. Each word was a calculated strike, designed to reclaim the narrative. The crowd breathed as one, their collective focus shifting towards Jake, their hopes igniting a fire within him. For a split second, he glimpsed a flicker of uncertainty in the officer's icy demeanor. That brief hesitation was enough for Jake to press on, to dig deep into his newfound resolve. What I see in front of me, he continued, heart racing, is an opportunity, a chance for real dialogue. But that requires vulnerability from both sides. The crowd responded with murmurs of agreement, emboldened by Jake's message. He could feel the shift in their energy, their willingness to confront the officer alongside him. Each nod, every encouraging glance reinforced his determination. He could not let their courageous spirit fade away. As the officer clenched his jaw, a wave of defiance surged through Jake. He understood that standing up for others wasn't just a derivative act, it was actively embracing his own worth. This was the beginning of a personal metamorphosis. He could find strength and courage where once there was doubt, weaving a narrative that spoke of resilience rather than submission. Let me make myself clear, the officer shot back, his frustration unmistakable. This behavior will not be tolerated. Jake's pulse quickened, but he welcomed the adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was the confrontation he sought. And what will we do then? Return to silence? That silence has cost us dearly. The real disruption is ignoring our collective voice. Jake's heart pounded. He was uncovering hidden depths within himself, depths that allowed him to assert himself without faltering. He was no longer simply a bystander in his life, he had become the catalyst for change. The officer's hostility could not erase the momentum he had created. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once, like standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into uncertainty. In this transformative moment, Jake's mind swirled with possibilities. He realized the confrontation itself was a crucial part of his development. What was at stake now extended beyond the issue at hand. This was about establishing his identity as a leader, one who could navigate unyielding opposition. He envisioned the path ahead, one filled with pacific resistance and fervent advocacy, but as the officer's eyes narrowed, Jake knew that the real challenge was just beginning. As tension hung in the air, a voice from the back of the crowd broke through. What if we don't just speak? What if we act? A shiver ran down Jake's spine. This was the moment of truth he had anticipated. Would he lead by example in this uncharted territory, pushing back against not just the officer's authority but a lifetime of hesitance? It was time to decide the kind of leader he wanted to be, and that choice might well define his future. The officer's menacing glare glanced at the crowd, assessing the shifting dynamics. Jake sensed the officer's encroaching resolve, but within his own chest, he felt the exhilaration of potential unfurling. What could this lead to? How far would he be willing to go? Jake steadied himself for what lay ahead, the whispers of uncertainty mingling with swift exhilaration. The spark for change flickered dangerously near the surface. He was unearthing a part of himself he had kept dormant, and he could already taste the change that could come. Suddenly, clarity. The time had come to face not just external opposition but the inner barriers he had long embraced. Would he seize this moment and transform it into something extraordinary, leading the charge for what he believed in? The air thickened with undeniable energy, and as he met the officer's gaze, Jake understood that destiny awaited on the other side of fear. Would he step forward, or retreat into the shadows of self-doubt? Jake Thompson's eyes narrowed, every fiber of his being ignited by purpose as he faced the officer's towering figure. The weight of the moment pressed against him, but he knew he had cultivated a newfound resilience through recent revelations. He was no longer the man shackled by the expectations of his affluent life. Jake had emerged, ready to embrace authenticity and champion the voices that had long been silenced. Your intimidation doesn't dignify the urgency for understanding, Jake declared, conviction resounding in his tone. This moment transcends just discipline, it's about empathy and connection. We're not here to create barriers but rather to dissolve them. He gestured toward the crowd. Here stood a tapestry of shared experiences, each deserving of acknowledgement. Recognition lit their eyes, amplifying the energy that thrummed through the gallery. The officer faltered, suspicion etched across his face. Discussions won't resolve the disruptions, he shot back, yet the tremor in his voice betrayed uncertainty. Jake saw the shift, sensing the crowd's alignment with his call to voice dissent. This was the acceleration of his transformation, and he pressed forward. Disruptions arise from dismissing needs, he argued, his voice even louder now, buoyed by raw passion. What if we embrace this opportunity to redefine success from mere appearances to genuine contribution? If we allow these voices to emerge, we elevate our understanding as a community. With every word, Jake felt the fissures of his past undoing. He recognized that vulnerability had become his most potent tool, shattering the echo of fear that had dictated his interactions for too long. The crowd whispered amongst themselves, heads nodding, an emerging alliance igniting in that charged atmosphere. Do you really believe they'll listen to your pleas? The officer sneered, tightening his grip on authority, but Jake sensed the weakening facade. Listen or not, he replied, this moment remains pivotal. Being heard is the first step toward healing. Shivers of anticipation coursed through him, yet palpable fear was being replaced by unshakable conviction. As the crowd rallied, buoyed by their collective aspirations, he surrendered to the tide of possibility. What if they together could establish a dialogue, transforming chaos into a purposeful exchange? His notion rippled through the throng, stirring hearts enmeshed in countless frustrations. Let us not just stand against something, let us stand for something. Each of us comes from a different journey, but we share one route forward through understanding and respect. Jake's sincerity echoed, and for the first time that evening, he saw humanity reflected not just in the crowd but in the officer's hardened expression, reddening his resolve. The moment crystallized. This was a tangible instance of transformation that fueled his growing confidence. In addressing the weight of their shared realities, Jake saw glimpses of hope illuminating the faces around him. He had confronted his apprehension, every heartbeat pulsing as evidence of his evolution. Then, as the officer shifted, his hardened outlook faltered. This isn't an area for emotional exhibitions. Jake inhaled, crystallizing his purpose. It's a place for human experience, the good and the bad. To share our pain is human, to disregard it is a choice that strips away our compassion. The word struck clear, and Jake embraced the sense of empowerment surging through him, a primal instinct connected to a greater truth. Sometimes the greatest disruption leads to the most significant breakthroughs. What about reaching out instead of assigning blame? That challenge landed firmly, inviting consideration from the very authority that threatened to extinguish the fire of conversation. The crowd murmured in agreement, sensing the bridge forming amidst tension, a bridge symbolizing newfound connection and shared human dignity. Enough. The officer barked, but it was clear he was losing the battle against their collective resolve. Take your protest elsewhere. Yet those words fell flat against the energy Jake had ignited. Each murmuring participant had been spun into a web of resilience woven together, and Jake felt their strength reverberate through him. Resilience burgeoned. Jake understood this wasn't merely about the chaos around them. This was his defining moment to forge a new identity rooted in authenticity. You want to stifle their voices? It's deeper than mere sentiment, it's about reclaiming agency. Imagine a world where every opinion opens a door for learning. The crowd surged with energy, an electrifying push forward as the realization dawned. Their empathy could create a revolution not just in that gallery but expanded far beyond their immediate experience. As the officer's resolve splintered, Jake felt himself growing into the person he had always aspired to be, not just as a philanthropist or an entrepreneur but as a genuine advocate for change. He envisioned crafting a community where artists like Lily could not only be seen but valued for their depth of human experience. That transformative instant, a wave of warmth enveloped him, a recognition of his innate ability to contribute meaningfully. He would no longer succumb to legacy or expectation. He was aligning the myriad fears he had grappled with into an outstanding force that embraced authenticity, empathy, and genuine connection. Ultimately, that defining moment breathed life into his ultimate potential. Jake stepped out of the shadows and into the light, not only for himself but for those whose voices were often overshadowed. He had conquered doubt, gracefully emerging to embrace the very vulnerability he once feared. Impossible announced its arrival as he celebrated solidarity, transformative change, and shared humanity. The room shifted, perceptions reoriented, with palpable tension now balanced with profound understanding. Despite the fracture in authority looming before him, Jake Thompson, no longer the man unmoored in privilege but anchored in integrity, sensed the world waiting just beyond the horizon of his act, the future pulsing vibrantly, a beckoning call to embrace their collective potential. His journey wasn't merely a moment for transformation. It was a decisive leap toward a future where authenticity resonated more profoundly than wealth ever could. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Let us discuss. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. If you believe in stories of personal overcoming, your support means everything.